Welcome to our part 7 of an ASP.NET Core MVC series, and today's topic is routing in MVC. So, ever wondered how your MVC app knows which controller and action to call when you hit this URL? In this video, we will break down the routing in MVC, the system that maps your URL to the right code behind the scene. To start with, I have created a standard MVC template application which consists of a home controller. Apart from this, I have also created a customer controller to explain you the different concept of routing. With this, if I run my application by clicking on this green button, you will notice that the entire project will be compiled, and the very first screen that comes in my case is home controller and then index action method. If I run this application, you will notice that the content that belongs to my index action method is rendered on my browser. Similarly, if I click on privacy, the next part is rendered on my screen. But why this home controller is the starting point of my application? Let me again stop it and show it to you from beginning. So if I again click on this green button, by default a home controller index method comes into a picture. Why and how? To understand this, let's go to program.cs. So in program.cs, I have a section defined and that says app.mapControllerRoute attribute, and it says that I have to load a home controller followed by an index action method as my starting point of an application. If you want to load something else, so for example, now if I want to load a customer controller as a starting point of my application, I can simply go to my program.cs and inside the controller section, I will write down customer, and in the action method section, index method will be there, and I know that in my customer controller, I already have an index action method. With this in place, if I run my application, you will notice that now a home controller is not my starting route, it's a customer controller. So it is quite clear that whatever you define inside this program.cs, that will become a starting point of your application, and that is a first part of routing. From theoretical perspective, a routing in MVC is divided in two different categories. The first category is called as conventional based route, and the second is an attribute based route. Whatever we have discussed so far is a conventional based route. And in conventional based route, I define all the configuration in my program.cs file. Even if I have to maintain a multiple configuration about routing, we will define this in my program.cs file, which we'll discuss this in a while. So in a conventional based routing, everything is defined in program.cs. And you can see that the first is controller, then action, and then followed by an additional parameter, and that is called as ID. Now, what exactly is that ID? So sometime it might happens that you want to pass certain parameter from the URL. Likewise, any of the IDs, maybe it's your customer ID, maybe it's your user ID. MVC also allows me to pass those parameters in the URL itself. We have not done it so far, so let's do it right now. I'll go to my customer controller, and inside a customer index action method, I will create another parameter, and let's call this as int ID, and then put a breakpoint over here to see what we really get from the URL. Now, if I run this application with the current state, and since my customer controller is my starting point of an application, you can see ID is coming as 0, obviously because I'm not passing it anything from the URL. Now, if I run this application, my customer view got loaded, but let's start modify the URL. So I'll write down over here as customer as my controller name, followed by my action method name, followed by another parameter that is my UR, that is my ID, and let's put ID as 10. Now, once I put ID as 10, you will notice that a 10 is coming over here. Okay, so that simply says that it's a conventional based route, and whatever I will define in the URL, my MVC routing allows me to pass this value in the controller itself. That is quite clear and quite standard, but let's try to play with it. Now it might be possible that you as an end developer don't want to create this parameter with the name as ID. And since I'm in a customer controller, I would like to create this parameter name as customer ID. Let's do this and let's run this application to see whether there is any change in the behavior or not. Now if I run this application and again with the same pattern, the starting point, since I'm not passing any ID, it will be still 0. But the moment I run this application and if I start passing my complete URL, that is customer index slash, then followed by a number, you will notice that customer ID is not coming in my URL. Why? Why customer ID is not coming, whereas couple of minutes back I was able to get the ID value from the URL? The answer to that problem is again a conventional based routing. So if I go to my program.cs, you can see that the third parameter that I have defined is an optional parameter because it includes a question mark in front of it. But apart from this optional parameter, it also says that my parameter should always name with an ID. It does not matter whether you are creating a string ID or a boolean ID or maybe another parameter, but whatever the controller action method you have created, your parameter name should be equivalent to the name that you have defined over here. Quite simple. Let's go to program.cs and change this parameter name as customer ID. Now, if I change this customer ID and if I again go to my customer controller by restarting this application, you will notice that this time when I put in the URL, it will work. So starting with it is 0 because nothing in the URL. But once I run it and once I go to my customer controller index method, and then if I go over there, you can see I am able to get the value. And this says that okay, with the help of conventional based routing, I can even define my custom parameter name in my URL itself. And the only thing that I have to modify is I have to come to program.cs and I have to modify this entire parameter name. Now let's again go back to the home controller. And since this is a home controller, and if I want to pass another parameter inside this as well, so I cannot name is customer ID because this home controller does not belong to customer. And if I put this as a customer ID as a parameter name, then it is not relevant to my current controller. So in that case, what I can put, I have to either go with an ID or with an home ID. Let's go with an ID only and let's again run this application. So the moment I run this application, by default, it will go to my customer controller and let me remove this breakpoint from here. But now if I want to go to my home controller, I have to click on this home button. And since I am not passing any ID from the URL, it is still 0. So let's go to the URL and pass a action method name followed by another parameter that is called as ID. And this time when I'm passing ID as 10 from my URL, and since it is a home controller, you can see that I'm still getting 0. Why? Because in program.cs now I have modified that my optional parameter should be named as customer ID. So that is a limitation in a conventional based routing where you can only pass a single ID or maybe a single type, and whatever you are passing, you are bounded to use the same parameter name across your different controllers and action method. MVC has given me an option to fix this problem. Let's copy this controller route attribute, paste it over there, and give it a different name. So maybe I'm saying that whenever I'm calling a home controller, it should be my ID. And whenever I'm calling a customer controller, it should be my customer ID. You can give some different name to it. Maybe let's say home. And now if I run my application, and again if I go to my home controller, the ID is 0 because that is not the case. But now if I pass home slash index slash 10, you will notice that I am getting the value over here. So in this way, you can define multiple routes in your program.cs file, and in that way you can have a multiple routing defined. This seems to be okay, but there is a major drawback in this kind of routing approach. And the drawback is if you are working in a team and that team include multiple folks, you might ended up by getting a merge conflict because you keep on adding these routes again and again, you keep on modifying this program.cs file, and whenever you will merge your code into a source control to maybe let's say Bitbucket or Git, in that case you will get an issue in your program.cs and that is a merge conflict. Again, this is it's like additionally this part of defining a route is not very much good because you have to come to your controller and then you have to come to your program.cs and so on. It's a kind of a difficult task for me to switch back and forth between my controller to my program.cs. In order to get rid of this kind of issue, .NET team has come up with a different part of routing, and that is attribute based routing. In attribute based routing, we don't define anything in a program.cs. So whatever that comes in a program.cs as a part of your normal .NET Core application, that will there as it is. I will get rid of the separate routing that I have defined. I'll again make this as my home controller as my starting point, and let's revert this to ID itself again. Let's revert to what we got while starting of this project. And in attribute based routing, we don't define any route in my program.cs. We simply keep whatever there as it is as a part of my conventional routing. And then if I go to my customer controller, I'll start defining route over here. So in attribute based routing, the very first thing I'll define is route in the top of my controller, and whatever the value that I'm going to pass in my template. So let's say I want to load all my customer action method with the name as customer new. Now all the action methods that I will be defining inside my customer controller will be triggered from the route itself, not by customer name but by customer new name, because I have defined that the routing is there as a customer new. Similarly, this action method, which is my index one, I'll again define a route on top of it, and inside this I'll define a template name as index. If you want, you can give this as index name, or you can give some different name as well. So let's say we'll define this as index new. Once I define index new, then I can also pass a different parameter. So let's put a slash over here, and then the parameter name is customer ID. Now, once I run this application by having these changes, you will notice that this time if I put customer on the top, so let's say customer followed by index, it won't work because now my MVC have not registered this controller in my route table, but it has registered with a newer name. So let's grab this customer new, go to the browser, and in place of customer, pass customer new. In place of index, let's go to this action method and copy index new and pass it over there, and then press enter, and you will notice my customer view got loaded. If I apply a breakpoint over here to show you whether I am getting a relevant value or not from the URL, and if I run this, yes, a customer ID is coming as 10. Similarly, if I go to my home controller and if I apply a breakpoint, still you can see home is coming as 0. And now if I write down slash home slash index slash 10, I am also having a value. So with the help of an attribute based routing, it fixes my issues that I don't have to come to program.cs to define different type of optional parameter depending upon the controller itself. Whatever name of the parameter that I want to give, I can give it over there and I can make it work. The main advantage of an attribute based routing is that it allows you to define a route at the top of the controller. Let's suppose if I want to pass another parameter in my route, maybe a username. So I'll define a string parameter name as username. I'll go to my route and I'll pass another slash over here, and let's give the slash name as username. And let's again run this application. With this in place, if I again go to customer controller, let me remove this breakpoint. And if I again go to my browser and write down customer index slash 10 slash username, maybe let's say Rahul. And if I press enter, you will notice that I am basically getting an error. And that is something which you have to figure it out why I am getting an error inside this. Now you notice that I have put by default as a customer, whereas it should be customer new followed by index new, and then if I press enter, you can see I am getting both the values, so customer new and index new. So in simple terms, whenever you define an attribute based routing, you have to define a new route and then it will work in the URL. You can define as many parameters as you want, there is no issue in this. And while defining these parameters, you have to make sure that the name that you define in the parameter, the route should also have a different name itself. Even if you want to define multiple route to a single action method, that is also possible. I can do like this as well, and I can remove this username part. So now I am expecting that this username is an optional parameter. And if I again run this application with the current setup, And if I go to my browser and pass customer new as my URL, followed by index new, followed by my ID, and if I press enter, you can still see I am getting a customer ID and I am not getting a username because I have defined a route as customer ID that can only take a single parameter also. If I want to pass two parameters in my URL, let's say again, and again you can see it works. So still I am getting both the value. In that way, I can say that I can define multiple parameters, multiple route in a single action method with the help of an attribute based routing. Before we move to a next step, let me get another controller action method over here because I want to show you another thing. So let's say this is my action method and the name is customer, or maybe let's say the name is load, and get rid of this additional parameter. And you can see since both of my route is having a same naming convention or the same pattern, I am getting a warning in my MVC application that they both route represents a same part. If I run this application by doing some basic changes and let's run it, you will notice that MVC is not able to parse my application. And I am simply, if I go to my customer action method, so customer controller, customer new followed by index, you can see I'll get an error. And it simply says that you have an ambiguous match exception because both of your route are pointing to a same kind of pattern. Now, what does that mean? Whenever you registered certain route in MVC application, it is registered inside a route table. Inside that route table, it used to maintain a different route along with their physical path. And if you have a multiple entry in a route table with the same key, then MVC is not able to process it, and during runtime, it will throw an error by saying the same error message which says it's an ambiguous match exception. So you need to look for this warning. Let's change this as load and then rerun the application. And now you can see even the warning has been removed. And now if I go to my action method name, so I'll pass customer new followed by load followed by a number, and you will notice I'll get an error. But this time this error does not belongs to my route. It simply says that I haven't created a relevant view inside my customer folder or my shared folder, and that's why it is not able to render the correct view. But if I go to my action method and if I put a breakpoint over here and let's again run this application, you will notice that I am getting a breakpoint and I am still able to pass the number that is my customer ID. Now let's quickly create a view inside this so that we should not get this error in future. So I'll create a new view and give this view name as load.html, and inside this load.html let me quickly create a h1 tag and give this is customer view loaded, and let's again run this application. If I again go to my customer action method with the name as customer new followed by load followed by the ID, I'll still get a breakpoint over here with the relevant value, and if I press further you can see this got loaded. So now you can see that with the help of this routing I am able to load the values in my URL, and then that value is passed in my action method. Now let's assume in case of 10, if I pass -1, and you can see I'm still getting a -1 over here, but practically there should be no negative customer ID. If you're coming from any of the programming background, you know that we do not store these IDs in negative. Although it's an integer, and integer can support negative, but technically speaking, the ID as a negative should not be your database. But if I follow this, I'm still getting a hit on my route. Maybe if I write 0 over here and if I again press enter, I'm still getting a hit over this part. Now this is not correct, this is not appropriate, because while doing this, your end user is expecting that everything is working fine, Even they are passing an ID over there and that is working fine, but technically you know that this is not correct. You should not have something like ID inside your control action method. So in order to get rid of this kind of issue, what you can do, you can quickly stop your application and apply a simple check over here. So if customer ID is less than equal to 0, then I can return maybe a view, or I can return a not found object result. And let's say the this is my error message, which can simply say, although this is not correct, maybe I have to include something else, but I can apply a check over here which simply says that if customer ID is less than 0. So let's quickly return a view and see what we get. So we simply return a view over here and we are simply saying that if customer ID is 0, less than 0, then return some different view, else return a normal view. I have not created a different view, but you can assume that there should be a separate part of it. And now if I again run this application, and if I again go to my customer action method, so customer new followed by index new, followed by load, followed by another parameter name is -1. And if I put enter over there, you can see I'm still getting a hit. And then if I press F10, whatever the logic, whatever the view that I want to return, that will be redirected from here. Now, this is fine, this will work in your scenario, but this is not a very optimal approach because you are polluting your customer controller with these kind of if else block. And technically, we should be avoiding ourselves by providing such kind of business logic and or maybe these parameter logic inside my controller. So the recommended way of managing this kind of issue in MVC is route constraint. A route constraint are the constraint that you define in the route itself, and with the help of these constraint, if a route is not following that constraint, it is not even added into a route table. For example, in this case, if I want to make sure that a customer ID should be only a positive number, I can put a colon apart from my route parameter itself and give this ID name as integer. Now I'm saying that this customer ID is a part of an integer and it will not accept any other value. Although it is already an integer, so that will not make any difference, but I can even club multiple route constraint. I can again put another colon over here and give the min value and pass the parameter as a 1. Now with this in place, I am basically forcing my MVC route table that a customer ID in this action method will only have a value and that should be minimum as 1. It will not accept 0, it will not accept anything in negative. Let's run this and see the output of it. So if I run this application again and if I go to the browser, you will notice that the moment I write down customer new followed by load followed by 1, I'm getting a hit over there because now my customer ID is 1 and it works. But moment I put 0, I simply get 404 because that route is not even registered in my route table. The same behavior will be there in the application if I put anything as -1. And again, the same thing is there. So I can make sure that what kind of parameter I want to allow in my route, and that can be done with the help of route constraint. You can see I can club multiple constraint. I can also provide a max value, although max value is not a recommended solution for this case because you never know that how many customer can be created in your database. But let's assume if I provide a max value is 100 and if I again run this application, you will notice that now I'm only allowing a parameter in my customer new controller with an index action method. So customer new slash load slash 1, it will work because my minimum value is 1 slash 99, it will work because my minimum value is 100, maximum value is 100. But the moment I pass 101 over here, it will again not work and give me 404 because I am forcing my controller that it should be minimum is 1 and maximum is 100. In that way, we can say that with the help of this routing constraint, I can basically define multiple things in my routing, a multiple constraint, and with the help of this constraint, I can even prevent myself of writing a nasty if-else logic inside my controller. There are multiple route constraints that are available in a MVC. Moreover, if I want to provide any kind of regex-based constraint, I can put a colon and can define a regex over here. You can check this constraint in an official documentation of an MVC application, which I'll put in the description. But in order to work with these of constraint or these routing, you have to work on this part. So this is all about a routing in MVC along with routing constraint. While implementing a routing in MVC, please try to use a attribute based routing and not a conventional based routing, because a conventional based routing is something which is obsoleted these days. We used to work it in an earlier version of MVC, but now that is not in use. Always use attribute based routing because it will give you a full control, and it will also prevent you of having any kind of merge conflict whenever you are trying to merge your code with your folks, with your colleagues. That's it for this video. Please stay tuned for some more deep insights in MVC, and in the next series, we'll come up with another interesting topic in MVC ecosystem. Thank you. Bye.